So, thank you for joining us today for this interview, Mr. Evans. Well, thanks for having me, Mr. Evans. So, what is the subject matter for this theme of work? So, the subject matter for this work focuses on the idea of Kirkgate Market and Victoria Gate versus each other. It's kind of a battle over the gentrification of Leeds and how I feel personally as an artist that it's being kind of the real pride of Leeds is being almost suppressed by what the council is doing with Victoria Gate especially, and it's stripping away kind of the soul and the kind of dirt and grit that Leeds has and kind of turning it into something it's not. It's like almost plastification for me. It's about like how everything should be so bright and pretty, but it's not true to what I feel Leeds is really about. So why did you choose this subject matter for this theme of work? I think this subject matter really spoke to me personally because it also represents like an internal struggle I have with my family coming from like 2 generations ago in my grandparents and my grandparents' parents being kind of more working class, and then over time my family developing more towards middle class, and it's kind of representing that the kind of working class ethos in my family is still everyone in my family works super hard. Like both my grandparents on my dad's side work, my parents are both working now, and they work like 13, 14 hour days. So it was kind of a mix of me seeing what I could in Leeds and then identifying as that something personal. So it's a personal matter, but it's also a way of me commenting what's happening as a whole in Leeds itself, but it's also like self-commentary as well. Do you think your background has affected this theme of work? Like I said before, it's actually really personal, this kind of subject matter, that I don't think these kind of working class kind of hubs should be really paved over like they're being in Leeds at the moment. I feel like Leeds is kind of losing its pride in kind of the old established, apart from places like City Hall and kind of Leeds City Museum, and kind of going in this new modern direction more, which I don't think really captures what Leeds as a whole is all about, Do you think this work has been particularly influenced by any other artists at all? There has been quite a lot of artist influence in this work, and then they influence the work in all different sorts of ways. So we have Barbara Kruger, kind of more focusing that on not her visually, but more kind of her work in a conflict kind of sense. And then Nick Salick is someone that I've really focused on visually because he takes these kind of architectural forms, like the brutalist forms that I've seen a lot around Leeds, especially doing the kind of Kirkgate Market side of it, and focusing that and then extracting that like I've done with the patterns in the GIFs and the kind of end video, and then putting that into a more gallery setting, which I think is really important and key and kind of visually exciting to remove these things from their initial environment and really kind of explore them in a gallery setting, kind of focus down on these. And then just like 2 kind of artists that are really key to me, and architects that are really key to me is Marcel Breuer and Paul Rodolph, because I think their work in brutalist forms is really kind of exciting and still visually really interests me. And why did these artists have such a particular effect on this work? For me, I've already kind of answered the Barbara Kruger aspect with her, like more the conflict approach to her work and bringing conflict kind of and opening it up and saying about it, and then Nick Salick as well. But for me, Marcel Breuer has this quote that really kind of stuck with me, and it's the smallest detail can be as important as the whole structure itself. And I think that's really what I focused on, is kind of these small visual differences in these places that might be overlooked, but actually how sometimes they're really linked and how sometimes they're quite different. And I think that's kind of represented in the work itself, how you have these structures kind of interacting and then moving apart. So it's almost saying about the kind of differences and similarities in some of these places that I think is important as well. Out of all the places in Leeds to choose, why did you choose Victoria Gate versus Kirkgate Market? I think for me personally, like Kirkgate Market was really important when I first came to Leeds as an as a city. It's a really kind of place that I connected with and felt very kind of integrated in Leeds as a society. And then there's like a really interesting road in Leeds where it splits kind of deliberately, almost it seems like a kind of barrier in between these two things. On one side you have the gentrified kind of area of Victoria Gate, and on the other side you have what the Victorians kind of did to gentrify Leeds back in the day, and kind of with that old Victorian facade at the front of Kirkgate Market. So it's kind of interesting to see how, like, a few hundred years the gentrification aspect has changed and kind of, you know, adapted to see what the middle class then wanted and what the middle class now wants, and kind of how what used to be really shiny and kind of amazing and impactful in the Victorian era is now kind of being overshadowed by this modern kind of facade, this modern kind of architecture of Leeds. Were there any challenges in shooting in either of these locations at all? For me, the challenges was kind of like about getting up close enough to the work and the patterns without kind of being really too like intrusive or like kind of in the way of like just, so kind of going more undercover than I normally would, and kind of getting these pictures. Is actually funny, when in Victoria Gate I was actually asked to stop taking photographs, which is interesting to me. For some reason they didn't like the fact I was just kind of hanging around taking photographs, whereas Kirkgate Market, that really wasn't brought up at all. What is your opinion on the gentrification of Leeds? I've touched on it a little bit before, but I think the gentrification of Leeds is actually kind of a scary thing, and it's kind of had two stages to it really, with Kirkgate Market going through it in the 70s and the addition of that kind of back section of it that kind of appears like it's like a glorified cattle shed at some points. For me, it's kind of important that we keep comment to it, and I think that was kind of attempted again in the 70s and 80s with this kind of Leeds architecture style, which you can see the Yorkshire Playhouse is kind of done in the style, this kind of faux kind of Leeds brickwork with a kind of coloured plastic in it, and I don't think, for me personally, it really pulled it off. But I don't think the way that kind of the shiny kind of glitz and glam kind of the Victoria Gate and the kind of casino and that kind of link to it doesn't really fit with me personally in my view of Leeds, and I know it doesn't fit like with a lot of people on the more of the Kirkgate side of it. And I think, yeah, it's important to gentrify, obviously, to bring these places new so they don't get run down and forgotten, but it's also important kind of not to forget what Leeds is, and I think that's what's happened really well with the Corn Exchanges. How it's, yes, it's been adapted and it's modernised and kind of hipsterised in a way, and whereas but it's not done, it still celebrates the building, and there's still history there. It's not, Victoria Gate kind of paved over the old police station and the old brutalist structure there, and it's kind of left that all behind. It doesn't make comment to that anyway. Maybe in the brickwork, but it's kind of again done in a way to make it look elaborate and grand. Finally, have you thought about expanding this project at all to include other cities around the UK? Me, I think it's a project that definitely could only be expanded in Leeds itself. It can be expanded nationwide. I think gentrification is really affecting areas like Sheffield, Manchester, but also cities down by where I used to live at my parents' house in Birmingham, and even Worcester to a certain extent is getting a new kind of, is getting this new shopping centre, and it's all kind of being done up, and it's like the history of Worcester and with that link to the Civil War is kind of going away, and the same with Birmingham with the Bull Ring and kind of areas like Digbeth and stuff like that. That's kind of, apart from the Custer factory, it's again, it's this hipsterisation of kind of areas and this kind of glamourifying of other areas as well. And it's like meaning that lots of money is focused into certain sections of the city, whereas other parts are being, and other communities are being forgotten about. So I definitely think it can be expanded much broader than just Leeds and just Kirkgate Market, Victoria Gate itself. Well, Mr. Evans, I think that's all the questions I have for you today. Thank you for your time.